Hi, we need to take a look at the Friday Figurative Language bell ringer help sheet. I want you to take out binder piece Q1A0, and we need to talk about those terms before we do today's bell ringer. The terms are alliteration, allusion, assonance, hyperbole, idiom, irony, metaphor, onomatopoeia, personification, pun, simile, synecdoche, and oxymoron. We need to add oxymoron. We'll do that in a minute. But just to hit these real quick, alliteration is a repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. So bouncing baby boy, b-b-b, that would be alliteration of the letter B. An allusion is any time a person mentions an historical figure or event or a literary figure or event, and they don't explain it, they just mention it because they expect that their reader will already know who the person or the thing is, and you don't need any explanation. They just allude to it because you already know everything about that person or event yourself. Assonance is when you have a lot of the same vowel sound in a single section of a text. The words don't rhyme, but maybe you have a lot of words that have the long A sound. Praise, glade, space. So they don't rhyme, but they have that A sound, and they're maybe in the same area of text. A hyperbole is a big, huge exaggeration. An idiom is anytime I use words in a way that I don't mean them literally, and it's a little saying. So, for example, if I accidentally say something and blow a surprise for someone, ruin their surprise birthday party, then I can say, oh man, I can't believe I told them about that. I let the cat out of the bag, or I spilled the beans. I did neither. I don't like beans, and I love cats. So clearly, neither of those expressions are accurate to me as a person. But if I told a secret, I can use that idiom to say I did. Irony, we know, is a contrast between what really is and what we thought it was going to be. So it's like, it's usually some sort of a surprise. We get looped. We get, I didn't think it would be like that. That's surprising and ironic. A metaphor is when we compare two things, but we basically just say that the one thing is the other thing. So, for example, if a mom is sitting in her kitchen and her 3-year-old daughter is out in the mud puddles, splashing around and catching frogs, and then the daughter comes in and she's covered with mud from head to toe and carrying a big old fat bullfrog, the mom might love that, and she might say, oh, my angel walked in with her blah, 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 blah. Calling the little girl an angel is a metaphor, because she's not an angel, she's a girl. So when you call something it's not, and you just act like it is that other thing, that's a metaphor. Onomatopoeia, we know, is anytime there's a sound and we want to put it into word form. Crash, bang, boom, onomatopoeia. Personification is anytime we give a quality of a person to something that is not a person. Anytime we say something has an emotion or a feeling, that's personification, when that thing is not a person. A pun is just bad humor. A pun is when you take a word that sounds like another word or makes you, like, it can almost step in the place of that other word based on what it sounds like, but not what it means. And, like, for example, if there's a birthday card with a rabbit on it, and someone says, happy birthday, happy like it hops, happy birthday, that's a pun. And when you find yourself going, that's not funny, then you know for sure it's a pun, because puns are the lowest form of humor. They're not funny. Simile is a comparison using like or as. So, I was busy as a bee. I am being compared to a bee. And I use the word as. Synecdoche is tricky. Synecdoche is when we just use a little part of an object to represent the entire object. I don't have a good example to give you right now, so I'm hoping we see one on the Friday Figurative Language so I can see a good example. And the last one is oxymoron, and that one's not actually on your paper, so we need to add it. An oxymoron is when you put two opposite words together next to each other for effect. So you're going to need to write this on the bottom of your notes. I'll just put it here for me, for now. Oxymoron. See that? You writing this down? Two opposite words next to each other for effect. I hope you can see that. Let's see. Almost. Hold on. Ew, come closer. There. Oxymoron. Two opposite words next to each other for effect. Okay, let's do this figurative language now. Okay, so I'm erasing this. Number 1 says, when the principal entered the class with a frightening scowl, the room was filled with a deafening silence. When the principal entered the class with a frightening scowl, the room was filled with a deafening silence. This is a very stressful little sentence here. Deafening silence, that's interesting. Silence means there's no sound, and something that is deafening means whatever it is so loud that you actually lost your hearing because of it. So silence means no sound, and deafening means so loud that it could actually damage your ears. So when I look at that, I say that is very interesting. Deafening silence, underline it, and we're going to call it an oxymoron. That's so cool. Number 2, John was lucky to be alive. He walked away with only minor cuts and bruises when his convertible was completely crushed in the crash. It's sort of hard to say. John was lucky to be alive. He walked away with only minor cuts and bruises when his convertible was completely crushed in the crash. All those sounds make me think that it must be, that's right, I heard you, alliteration. Okay, put that back in your binder, keep that in your binder, and I'll take it from you on Monday, the bell ringer. Okay, at this point, we're going to be reading a story out of the book together, and so we're going to need to get books. What I'd like you to do is, if you don't already have your book, I want you to stand up, push your chair in, tag the wall, get a book, get back to your chair, and we'll get started. Hi. All right, so we're going to read The Necklace today. You should have the study guide questions in front of you. The Necklace by G De Maupassant. It's got this cute little chick on it. Okay, open up those books, page 293. Let's go. All right, so we start with building some understanding, some background information. When I look at this, it says, background information, European society. During the 19th century, the old social order in Europe changed. Previously, society had been divided into two main classes, the nobles, who owned the land, and the peasants who farmed it. However, as industry spread, a new middle class emerged, and people could rise or sink in social position. Some sought to own material goods as a mark of a higher social standing. So we're in the 1800s here, the late 1800s. This gentleman who wrote this story, G De Maupassant, he lived only from 1850 to 1893. He was only 43 when he died. So he is writing about the time period in which he lived. So this is a very realistic time period that he's writing in. So when we say that society changed, remember this is the time of the Industrial Revolution. I don't know if you've learned about that or not yet, but there were, before the machinery started to be developed, what we had was really rich people and really poor people, and not really anything in between. And with the making of machines and people becoming more of working class people in factories and stuff, we had something like a middle class emerge, so a whole other middle level of people. And the middle class people obviously everybody wants to be rich, so they wanted to be wealthy as well. And so anytime they had an opportunity, they would buy possessions that made them look wealthier than they were. I don't know, maybe we do that too. So let's take a look at your study guide number 1. It says, what change happened to European society by the end of the 19th century? Go ahead and write down, you only need to write the answer, but write down what changed. How did society change in this time period? What happened? What emerged? Write it down. Number 2 on the study guide. I want you to write 2 sentences about this. It says, why do people want to own expensive things? Why do people want to have it? Why do I want to have a Dooney and Burke purse? Why do I want that? Write at least 2 sentences explaining this, why people like to have expensive things. And in those 2 sentences, use at least 2 of these 4 words. Here are the words I want you to choose from. Obtain, impress, exceed, identity. Obtain, impress, exceed, or identity. So, write me 2 sentences telling me why people would want to own expensive things. And in those 2 sentences, use 2 of those 4 words. Go ahead. Okay. Oh, make sure that you underline the 2 words that you chose in your sentences. I'm going to read now about G De Maupassant, and as I do so, you might consider looking at number 3. When did G De Maupassant live? Which 3 words do people use to describe the kinds of tales that Maupassant wrote? Okay. G De Maupassant lived from 1850 to 1893. Perhaps the best-known short story writer in the world, G De Maupassant wrote tales that are realistic and pessimistic and often offer surprise endings. Pessimistic, that means kind of has a negative edge to it. Glass half empty. Friendship with writers. Following his army service, he settled in Paris, where he began to develop his skills as a writer, guided by the famous French author Gustave Flaubert. Maupassant also joined a circle of writers led by the French novelist Émile Zola. And with Zola's encouragement, Maupassant published his first story called Ball of Fat in 1880. The story earned him immediate fame and freed him to write full-time. The Necklace is perhaps his most widely read story. All right, let's get started. Before we jump into the actual story, there are some things I want you to think about. Look at number 4. Which of these statements do you agree with? So I'm going to read a statement, and if you agree with it, circle agree. And if you disagree, circle disagree. Okay, letter A. Do you agree with this? Having expensive possessions is a sign of success. Agree? Disagree. Letter B. A person's physical appearance reveals what his or her personality is like. A person's physical appearance reveals what his or her personality is like. Do you agree with that or disagree? Letter C. People get what they deserve in life. Agree or disagree? Letter D. People should repay all their debts at all costs. Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? Okay, as we go through this story, the questions on the study guide are in order. So I would recommend this. I would say read the question, the first one on the, that we haven't done yet, like we're going to read number 5. and then I'm going to read the story. And as we go through, what you want to do is, as you hear the answer to these questions, you need to jot down the answers. You don't have to write in whole big sentences. I didn't give you enough room to do that, but you would jot down the answers as we go through. Now let's say we get through the whole story and you missed answers. You didn't get them. You can go to my Weebly page. Hold on, my hair's sticking up. nutteranchorbay.weebly.com, and on the website you would go to the English homepage, and on the English homepage you would find a pull down tab that says literature, and you would be able to find the electronic copy of this story that you would be able to read at home and look up what you need to in order to have your study guide complete. There will be a quiz on this, and you know I'm a quizaholic, so we are going to have a quiz on this story, so it's important that you pay attention and that you jot down the answers. Let's get started. Number 5 says, what does the author mean when he writes that the character was born, quote, as if by an error of fate, into a petty official's family? Number 6 is going to say, read the first 3 paragraphs and circle the method of characterization that the author is using in this story. Method of characterization. That's the, oh my gosh, remember that's the one where you recognize what point of view it is. If it's first person point of view, it's second method of characterization. You should look probably on that binder piece I gave you that explains how do you know which method of characterization it is based on which point of view you have. Okay, let's go. I'm going to read this story. You get the answers as much as you can. Whatever you can't get, you're going to need to look up and find. Okay? The Necklace by G De Maupassant. And by the way, this story takes place present time, current time of G De Maupassant. So we're talking late 1880s, and it's in France. It's in Paris. Okay. She was one of those pretty, charming young women who are born, as if by an error of fate, into a petty official's family. She had no dowry, no hopes, not the slightest chance of being appreciated, understood, loved, and married by a rich and distinguished man. So she slipped into marriage with a minor civil servant at the Ministry of Education. Unable to afford jewelry, she dressed simply, but she was as wretched as a déclassée, for women have neither caste nor breeding. In them, beauty, grace, and charm replace pride of birth. Innate refinement, instinctive elegance, and suppleness of wit gives them their place on the only scale that counts, and these qualities make humble girls the peers of the grandest ladies. She suffered constantly, feeling that all the attributes of a gracious life, every luxury, should rightly have been hers. The poverty of her rooms, the shabby walls, the worn furniture, the ugly upholstery caused her pain. All these things that another woman of her class would not have even noticed tormented her, made her angry. The very sight of the little Breton girl who cleaned for her awoke rueful thoughts and the wildest dreams in her mind. She dreamt of thick carpeted reception rooms with oriental hangings, lighted by tall bronze torches, and with 2 footmen in knee breeches made drowsy by the heat of the stove, asleep in the wide armchairs. She dreamt of great drawing rooms upholstered in old silks with fragile little tables holding priceless knickknacks, and of enchanting little sitting rooms redolent of perfume, designed for tea-time chats with intimate friends, famous, sought-after men whose attentions all women longed for. When she sat down to dinner at her round table with its 3-day-old cloth and watched her husband opposite her lift the lid of the soup tureen and exclaim delighted, "Oh, a good homemade beef stew, there's nothing better," she would visualize elegant dinners with gleaming silver amid tapestried walls peopled with knights and ladies and exotic birds and fairy forests. She would think of exquisite dishes served on gorgeous china, and of gallantries whispered and received with sphinx-like smiles while eating the pink flesh of trout or the wings of grouse. She had no proper wardrobe, no jewels, nothing, and those were the only things that she loved. She felt she was made for them. She would have so loved to charm, to be envied, to be admired and sought after. Let's pause right there. I hope that you have figured out what method of characterization the author is using. Now remember, characterization is what we say when we say how the author lets us get to know his characters. Does he tell us a lot of stuff? Does he tell us a little bit of stuff? Does he tell us stuff but it's not reliable? Or does he really tell us nothing at all? He just is kind of like a video camera, and all we get is what a person could observe, seeing and hearing, but nothing that those characters are thinking. So, first method of characterization is the kind of characterization where the author just lays it out there for us. He says everything. Second method of characterization is the one that goes with a narrator who is the main character of the story, and it's in first person point of view. Third method of characterization is we can just have what is seen and what is heard, but we don't get inside the characters' heads. So, did you decide, is it first, second, or third method? Number 7, did you find out for yourself, why do you think the author mentions that she's sitting down at a table with a 3-day-old cloth on it? Number 8, do you think the husband notices that 3-day-old cloth? Yes or no? What kind of guy does he seem to be? So far, if you're keeping up with me, you've probably been able to complete questions 5 through 8. Okay, so now we're going to be on question 9, and I'm halfway down page 295 that starts with, she had a rich friend. She had a rich friend, a schoolmate from the convent she had attended, but she didn't like to visit her because it always made her feel so miserable when she got home again. She would weep for whole days at a time from sorrow, regret, despair, and distress. Then, one evening, her husband arrived home looking triumphant and waving a large envelope. "There," he said, "there's something for you." She tore it open eagerly and took out a printed card which said, "The Minister of Education and Madame Georges Rappeneau request the pleasure of the company of Monsieur and Mademoiselle at an evening reception at the Ministry on Monday, January 18th. Instead of being delighted as her husband had hoped, she tossed the invitation on the table and muttered, annoyed, "What do you expect me to do with that?" "Why, I thought you'd be pleased, dear. You never go out, and this would be an occasion for you, a great one. I had a lot of trouble getting it. Everyone wants an invitation. They're in great demand, and there are only a few reserved for employees. All the officials will be there." She looked at him, irritated, and said impatiently, "I haven't a thing to wear. How could I go?" It had never occurred to him. He stammered, But what about the dress you wear to the theater? I think it's lovely." He fell silent, amazed, and bewildered to see that his wife was crying. 2 big tears escaped from the corners of her eyes and rolled slowly down toward the corners of her mouth. He mumbled, "What is it? What is it?" But with great effort she had overcome her misery, and now she answered him calmly, wiping her tear-damp cheeks. "It's nothing. It's just I have no evening dress, and so I can't go to the party. Give the invitation to one of your colleagues whose wife will be better dressed than I would be." He was overcome. He said, "Listen, Matilda, how much would an evening dress cost? A suitable one that you could wear again on other occasions, something very simple." She thought for several seconds, making her calculations, and at the same time estimating how much she could ask for without eliciting an immediate refusal and an exclamation of horror from this economical government clerk. At last, not too sure of herself, she said, "It's hard to say exactly, but I think I could manage for 400 francs. He went a little pale, for that was exactly the amount he'd put aside to buy a rifle, so that he could go hunting the following summer near Nanterre, with a few friends who went shooting larks around there on Sundays. However, he said, "Well, all right then, I'll give you 400 francs. Try to get something really nice." As the day of the ball grew closer, Mademoiselle seemed depressed, disturbed, worried, despite the fact that her dress was ready. One evening her husband said, "What's the matter? You've really been very strange these last few days." And she answered, "I hate not having a single jewel, not one stone to wear. I shall look so dowdy, I'd almost rather not go to the party." He suggested, "You can wear some fresh flowers. It's considered very chic at this time of year. For 10 francs, you can get 2 or 3 beautiful roses." That didn't satisfy her at all. "No, there's nothing more humiliating than to look poverty-stricken among a lot of rich women." And then her husband exclaimed, "Oh, wait, you silly thing. Why don't you go and see Madame Forestier and ask her to lend you some jewelry? You certainly know her well enough for that, don't you think?" She let out a joyful cry. "You're right, it never occurred to me." The next day she went to see her friend and related her tale of woe. Madame Forestier went to her mirrored wardrobe, took out a big jewel case, brought it to Mademoiselle, opened it and said, "Take your pick, my dear." Her eyes wandered from some bracelets to a pearl necklace, and then from a gold Venetian cross set with stones of very fine workmanship. She tried on the jewelry before the mirror, hesitating, unable to bring herself to take them off, to give them back. And she kept asking, "Do you have anything else by chance?" "Why, yes, here, look for yourself. I don't know which ones you'll like." All at once, in a box lined with black satin, she came upon a superb diamond necklace, and her heart started beating with overwhelming desire. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She fastened it around her neck, over her high-necked dress, and she stood there gazing at herself ecstatically. Hesitantly, filled with terrible anguish, she asked, "Could you lend me this one? Just this, or nothing else?" "Yes, of course." She threw her arms around her friend's neck to kiss her ardently and fled with her treasure. The day of the party arrived. Mademoiselle was a great success. She was the prettiest woman there, resplendent, graceful, beaming, and deliriously happy. All the men looked at her, asked who she was, tried to get themselves introduced to her. All the minister's aides wanted to waltz with her. The minister himself noticed her. She danced, enraptured, carried away, intoxicated with pleasure, forgetting everything in this triumph of her beauty and glory of her success, floating in a cloud of happiness formed by all this homage, all this admiration, all the desires she had stirred up, by this victory so complete and so sweet to the heart of a woman. When she left the party, it was almost 4 a.m. Her husband had been sleeping since midnight in a small deserted sitting room with 3 other gentlemen whose wives were having a wonderful time. He brought her wraps so that they could leave, and he put them around her shoulders, the plain wraps from her everyday life, whose shabbiness jarred with the elegance of her evening dress. She felt this, and she wanted to escape quickly so that the other women who were enveloping themselves in their rich furs wouldn't see her. Loisel held her back. "Wait a minute. You'll catch cold out there. I'm going to call a cab." But she wouldn't listen to him, and she went hastily downstairs. Outside in the street, there was no cab to be found. They set out to look for one, calling to the drivers that they saw passing in the distance. They walked toward the Seine, shivering and miserable. Finally, on the embankment, they found one of those ancient nocturnal broughams, which can only be seen in Paris at night, as if they are ashamed to show their shabbiness in the daylight. It took them to their door in the Rue des Martyrs, and they went sadly upstairs to their apartment. For her, it was all over, and he was thinking that he had to be at the ministry by 10. I just want to pause for a second and point out to you the fact that they live on this street called the Rue des Martyrs. In French, rue means street. My maiden name was Leroux, but it used to be La Rue when my family first came to America, and it means the street. And a martyr, that's a good cognate in both French and English. The word looks the same in both languages. A martyr is someone who dies for their cause. Usually a martyr is a religious figure who's fighting for their religion, and when they are killed because they are trying to bring about their religion to the world and they're killed for it, they're called a martyr because they died for their faith. But you can be a martyr for any cause. So they live on the street of martyrs. And a martyr, sometimes the word martyr is used to make fun of somebody who is really whining and complaining about their situation. You know, like if someone goes, I can't believe we have homework again. Oh my gosh, you're such a martyr. In other words, you are just being tortured and persecuted for someone making you do homework. Oh, how dare they? So a martyr is someone who is tortured or persecuted. So she lives on the street of martyrs. So she's clearly tortured and persecuted. Okay, back to the book. Okay. Yeah, and he was thinking that he had to be to work by 10 in the morning, and here it's like 5 in the morning. She took off her wraps before the mirror so that she could see herself in all her glory once more. And then she cried out. The necklace was gone. There was nothing around her neck. Her husband, already half undressed, asked, What's the matter? She turned toward him in a frenzy. The necklace is gone. He got up, thunderstruck. What did you say? What? Impossible. And they searched the folds of her dress and the folds of the wrap and pockets and everywhere, and they didn't find it. He asked, Are you sure you still had it when we left the ball? Yes, I remember touching it in the hallway of the ministry. But if you had lost it in the street, we would have heard it fall. It must be in the cab. Yes, most likely. Do you remember the number? No. What about you? Did you notice it? No. They looked at each other in utter dejection. Finally, Loisel got dressed again. I'm going to retrace the whole distance we covered on foot, he said, and see if I can't find it. And he left the house. She remained in her evening dress, too weak to go to bed, sitting crushed on a chair, lifeless and blank. Her husband returned about 7 o'clock. He'd found nothing. He went to the police station, to the newspapers to offer a reward, to the offices of the cab companies, in a word, wherever there seemed to be the slightest hope of tracing it. She spent the whole day waiting, in a state of utter hopelessness, before such an appalling catastrophe. Loisel returned in the evening, his face lined and pale. He'd learned nothing. You must write to your friend, he said, and tell her that you've broken the clasp of the necklace and that you're getting it mended. That'll give us time to decide what to do. She wrote the letter at his dictation. By the end of the week, they had lost all hope. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared, We'll have to replace the necklace. Pause. I like that description. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared. What do you think that means when they say he's aged 5 years? It's been 1 week. That's right. It's been very stressful. It's just like how you see pictures of President Obama when he became president. He was this young, good-looking guy with brown hair, black hair. And at the end of his presidency, 8 years later, Obama looks like he was hit by a truck. His skin is all wrinkled. His hair is completely white practically. So stressful situations age us. So he aged 5 years in a week. That's how stressful this week has been for him. Okay, halfway down where it says, the next day they took the case. The next day they took the case in which it had been kept, the necklace that is, and went to the jeweler whose name appeared inside it. He looked through his ledgers. I didn't sell this necklace, madame. I only supplied the case. Then they went from one jeweler to the next, trying to find a necklace like the other, racking their memories, both of them sick with worry and distress. In a fashionable shop near the Palais Royal, they found a diamond necklace which they decided was exactly like the other. It was worth 40,000 francs. They could have it for 36,000 francs. They asked the jeweler to hold it for them for 3 days, and they stipulated that he should take it back for 34,000 francs if the other necklace was found before the end of February. Loisel possessed 18,000 francs left to him by his father. He would borrow the rest. He borrowed, asking 1,000 francs from one man, 500 from another, 100 here, 50 there. He signed promissory notes, borrowed at exorbitant rates, dealt with usurers and the entire race of moneylenders. He compromised his whole career, gave his signature even when he wasn't sure he'd be able to honor it, and horrified by the anxieties with which his future would be filled, by the black misery about to descend upon him, by the prospect of the physical privation and the moral suffering, went to get the new necklace, placing on the jeweler's counter 36,000 francs. When Mademoiselle went to return the necklace, Madame Forestier said in a faintly waspish tone, "You could have brought it back a little sooner. I might have needed it." She didn't open the case, as her friend had feared she might. If she had noticed the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Mightn't she have taken Mademoiselle for a thief? Mademoiselle came to know the awful life of the poverty-stricken. However, she resigned herself to it with unexpected fortitude. The crushing debt had to be paid. She would pay it. They dismissed the maid. They moved into an attic under the roof. She came to know all the heavy household chores, the loathsome work of the kitchen. She washed the dishes, wearing down her pink nails on greasy casseroles and the bottoms of saucepans. She did the laundry, washing shirts and dishcloths which she hung on a line to dry. She took the garbage down to the street every morning and carried the water upstairs, stopping at every floor to catch her breath. Dressed like a working-class woman, she went to the fruit store, the grocer, and the butcher with her basket on her arm, bargaining, outraged, contesting each sou of her pitiful funds. Every month, some notes had to be honored and more time requested on others. Her husband worked in the evenings, putting a shopkeeper's ledgers in order, and often at night as well, doing copying at 25 centimes a page. And it went on like this for 10 years. After 10 years, they had made good on everything, including the usurious rates and the compound interest. Mademoiselle looked old now. She'd become the sort of strong woman, hard and coarse, the one that one finds in poor families. Disheveled, her skirts askew with reddened hands, she spoke in a loud voice, slopping water over the floors as she washed them. But sometimes, when her husband was at the office, she'd sit down by the window and muse over that party long ago when she'd been so beautiful, the belle of the ball. How would things have turned out if she hadn't lost that necklace? Who could tell? How strange and fickle life is. How little it takes to make or break you. Then one Sunday, when she was strolling along the Champs-Élysées to forget the week's chores for a while, she suddenly caught sight of a woman taking a child for a walk. It was Madame Forestier, still young, still beautiful, still charming. Mademoiselle started to tremble. Should she speak to her? Yes, certainly she should. And now that she'd paid everything back, why shouldn't she tell her the whole story? She went up to her. "Hello, Jean." The other didn't recognize her, and was surprised that this plainly dressed woman should speak to her so familiarly. She murmured, "But, madame, I'm sure you must be mistaken." "No, I'm not. I'm Mathilde Loisel." Her friend gave a little cry. Oh, my poor Mathilde, how you've changed." "Yes, I've been through some pretty hard times since I last saw you, and I've had plenty of trouble, and all because of you." "Because of me? What do you mean?" "You remember the diamond necklace you lent me to wear to the party at the ministry?" "Yes, what about it?" "Well, I lost it." "Huh, what are you talking about? You returned it to me." "What I gave back to you was another one, just like it. And it took us 10 years to pay for it. You can imagine it wasn't easy for us since we were quite poor. Anyway, I'm glad it's over and done with." Madame Forestier stopped short. "You say you bought a diamond necklace to replace that other one?" "Yes, you didn't even notice then? They really were exactly alike." And she smiled, full of pride, a proud, simple joy. Madame Forestier, profoundly moved, took Mathilde's hand in her own. "Oh my, poor Mathilde. Mine was false. It was worth 500 francs at most." The end. All right, so now what you all need to do is simple. Go back through the text if you need to and get just the answers down to these questions. You need to do the plot curve. Remember, the strategy that we do is we first identify the problem for the protagonist. Like, what is the protagonist's issue at the beginning of the story? And then at the end of the story, how is that initial problem resolved? What was it that was the tipping point that caused that change in the struggle? I do want to just give you a hint and tell you that the problem of this story is not that she lost the necklace. That is not the conflict of the story. That's not the conflict. So the conflict is we get the conflict right away on the first couple of pages. Mademoiselle is our protagonist, and so you got to ask yourself, what's her issue? And that's going to be our conflict. And then at the end of the story, you need to say, if that's what it was at the beginning of the story, does that issue still exist? If it doesn't exist, how has it been resolved? What's going on with Mademoiselle at the end of the story? What's she like at the end? Okay? So do it in pencil so that when I come back and we talk about it, if we need to, we can erase. But I really want you to be doing the thinking on this. You can do this. Okay? All right.